Microsoft Project 2007 is basically a task organizing program. So any project you want to take on, like building a house or writing a book, typically requires many steps, or what are referred to as tasks in the project program. A very simple and basic sample would be to say I'm writing a book. For example, my first task would be to research the book, then next write the book, and then finally print the book. Now these tasks here are linked up in a relationship, meaning that, for example, I cannot start task 2 unless its predecessor task 1 has been completed. This would make sense in this project because if I haven't researched anything, then I have nothing to write about. Now the tasks are usually tracked on a timeline, which is each task is allotted so much time, like in hours, days, weeks, or months, to be completed. And if one task takes longer than its set time, then as a result, all of our project here will extend beyond its due date and of course be late. Now each task is going to require some resources, and there are 3 types of resources. You have your workers, which is who's going to work on task 1, task 2. For example, task 2, writing the book, you could have writers. The next resource would be materials. So once they're working on writing the book, do they need a piece of paper to write the book, or are they going to use a word processing program like Word 2007? And then finally you have the cost between the two. Are you going to pay your workers hourly or salary? And of course the cost of the materials. Now you have one additional resource, which is your budget, but we'll discuss that in the training. We're going to break it down as you see it here step by step in the Project 2007 Level 1 training videos. First thing we want to do is to open up Project 2007. Now you can either come down here and click on the Start button, or if you're like me, you added a shortcut to the program on your desktop, and you can learn more about this in the Windows Vista training videos. But if you want to create a shortcut like I did on the desktop, come down here, click on the Start button, go to the Instant Search field and type in Project 2007. And then up here in the Instant Search results we'll see Microsoft Office Project 07. Right click on it, because we want to go down and send it to our desktop as a shortcut. Go ahead and click on it, and when you click on it, it should be there on your desktop. Once it's there, just go ahead and double click to open up Project. Before we dive into Project here, I want to explain what you're looking at. First of all, starting up at the top of the title bar. Anytime you open up Project, you'll get a generic name like Project 1, Project 2. That is until you click on the Save button and rename it to, let's say, My Spiffy Project. That way, anytime you're in Project and you want to know what project you're working on, just look up here in the title bar and look for My Spiffy Project. Down below you have what are called menus that when you click on them they expand and give you more features that you can use in Project. And then below the menus you have 2 toolbars. The first one over to the left is the standard toolbar, or the most commonly used features within Project, and then over to the right you have the formatting toolbar, which you can format your font, make it bold, italics, underline. Now if you used other Office 2007 programs like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, they completely remove the menus and the toolbars, and in its place they put what's called a ribbon, or what I like to refer to as one big fat toolbar. For example, instead of the menu, in its place you'll have what are called tabs. When you click on it, it'll reveal everything within the toolbar down below by clicking from tab to tab to tab. But we're going to go ahead and work with our menus and toolbars until Microsoft with the next release changes it to a ribbon, if they decide to do it at all with Project. Now these toolbars are hiding objects or features that I cannot see until I go to the end of the toolbar, click on the double arrow, and then I can see more of the features or options. And again also down over to the right for the formatting. Instead of having these 2 toolbars share a single row and hiding those features, I can click on the drop down arrow and say I want to show the buttons on 2 rows. When I click on that, it now moves the standard toolbar and it has its own row up at the top, and then down below on the second row is the formatting toolbar. Now I can see all my buttons. Looks good. Now below the toolbars is what's called the entry bar, where you can actually enter in text. Well, when you enter the text in here, where does it go? It goes down below with whatever cell you have selected. So if I select this cell and I come up here and type in the text, it will display down below after I hit enter on the keyboard. By the same token, you can just come down in here in the cell and just start typing your text. The purpose of the entry bar is to give you a little bit more of a view of all the contents within a cell, where down below you can see the cell is limited to displaying what's within the cell by the size of the column. I mean, it can only go so big. So if I go ahead and select the cell and I have a lot of text in there, I can quickly just look up here to read the rest of the text. Of course, you can also expand the columns here, and we'll go over that. In fact, if you're not familiar with Excel, I recommend that you watch my Excel training videos so you can learn how to move around in these cells, edit, use the autofill handle. All this I cover in the Excel training videos. then it'll be a lot easier for you to navigate around in Project. And then below the entry bar here, you have a split window. In fact, you can see the divider here that's dividing it into two panes. The left side is the table view, the right side is the chart view, or referred to as the Gantt chart. Not to confuse it with the whole view here that includes the table, because that is referred to as the Gantt chart view. So you have the Gantt chart view, and then you have the Gantt chart here. To oversimplify it, when you enter in a task here, a task name like I want to clean out the fridge, and then you enter in how long it's going to take, like 2 or 3 hours or a couple weeks or months. And then you'll enter in the start date, and then with the start date combined with the duration, it'll give us the finish date. And then over in the chart view, it'll display a corresponding bar that will span that timeline or that duration, 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, and so on. Now the project that I'm going to be taking us through is that we're going to create a software training manual, and we're going to be going through phases. We'll start with the research phase, followed by the outline, development, testing, reviewing, and then finally the last task will be printing our book, and once we've done that, we've completed the project. Now the concepts that you learn in my project can also be applied in whatever project you'll be working on. Now if you want, Microsoft Project has a little help guide that you can use to get you started by coming up here, clicking on the View menu, and going down to turning on the project guide. When you do that, it opens up the task pane and then also the project guide bar. Now, while this will get you started by defining your project and giving you a little bit of detail or an explanation about how to do that, it'll only get you so far. So we're not going to use this for two reasons. Because one, I'm going to be your project guide, and two, these are basically training wheels to get you started, because once you're done with the project guide, you'll have to advance or leave the nest sometime to start using the menus and the buttons on the toolbars, which I'd rather get started right off the bat and get used and more familiar to that than eventually having to leave it later on. So let's go ahead and turn it off by clicking on the View menu and going down to turning off the project guide. Next, I want to go ahead and save my project. Instead of the generic title Project 1, I'm going to click Save. Go to my desktop, because on my desktop I have my exercise folder. Double click on that, and then down below let's name the project. It's going to be our software, and then go ahead and click Save. And you can see up in the title bar I'm now in the Software Training Manual project, or file. Now the first thing I like doing is setting up my project start date. So what we're going to do is, instead of using today's date, we're going to pretend and go back and use an earlier start date. Now two reasons why we're going to jump back to the year 2008 to do this project is, first of all, if you're in the middle of a project, I want to show you that you can definitely backdate this and then add as you go along and get up to the current date in your project. Second of all, it'll make it much easier to show the progress as we move along in a later time than it is to be in the current date today and trying to move ahead with the examples I want to show you. So to set the project start date, I'm going to come up here and click on the project menu and go down to project information. That's the first thing I would do. Start date has got today's date. Like I said, instead we're going to go back. You can either click on the drop down arrow and scroll around, or come up here and just type in the project start date, which is going to be 2008, and it's going to be August 1st, 2008. And then just hit the tab key so it accepts it. So when you click on the drop down arrow, it's got you right there, August 2008. Now if you watch my Access 2007 training videos, setting up Access is a process. It's not all done in one screen. And I know you're probably looking at this current date and going, oh my gosh, we got to change it back to the start date here. Don't concern yourself with this. This is going to be a process. So if you'll be patient as I walk through step by step and as you absorb all this in, by the end of the level 1 training video, you'll have a much broader perspective about how to set up your project. So we're going to move ahead and click OK. And then it takes us in the timeline over here to the year 2008. And then the next thing I'd like to do is to add our company name to the project, who's the manager, who's in charge of it, things like that. Now I have nowhere to type it in here, so what I'll do is I'll use the Properties, File, and then go down to Properties. And this will give me a chance to type in who the author is, the company, and so on, which had already auto-filled in, like the title here, Software Training Manual. Maybe the name of the software is Spiffy, so it's a Spiffy Software Training Manual. And then down here, the subject is Training Manual. Basically anything you want to keep track of that you don't want to display up here, but you want to have some personal notes in the properties. Not only that, but any keywords you type in here will be searchable. So if you have 1,000 projects and you remember one had the word Spiffy, but you don't have it in the title here, you can do a search, an instant search, from clicking on the Start button and typing in Spiffy, and it'll actually pull up this project because one of the keywords you have in here is the word Spiffy. And then of course any comments you have about the project, go ahead and type them in there. And then of course when you're finished, click OK. Now one thing I want to warn you before we close out of this session is that when you start entering in your task and you're going through and you're making all these changes, remember you do have an undo button to undo your mistakes. Now I'm assuming that you've watched or you learned Excel or one of the other basic Office programs before you dive into Project. And if you have, again, you'll have your undo and redo buttons. So you can undo your mistakes or redo your mistakes. Now, when you click on the Save button, this undo will disappear. Unlike Microsoft Word, when you click Save, you can still undo your mistakes. So keep that in mind, that before you click on the Save button, make sure you're feeling confident with all the changes that you made. Or if you're not sure, go ahead and save a copy of your project as copy backup 2 or backup 3 and so on. That way when you click Save and you lose the undo button and you just realize you made a major mistake, you can of course revert back to that backup copy. For example, there's the undo button. When I click Save, it disappears. I can no longer click on the undo. By default, Microsoft is going to assign your project the standard calendar template. Now the standard calendar has a typical work week of Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with a 1-hour lunch and no holidays. I strongly recommend that you do not use the standard calendar, and this is why. If you make any changes like exception days, days where you want to block out time for events like holidays or vacation, or you want to change some of the default working hours from, let's say, 8 to 5 to 9 to 5 on Thursdays, or even change the work week from Monday through Friday to Tuesday through Saturday, you're junking up the standard calendar template with custom settings which most likely won't match the need of your next project. Because every new project you create will by default be assigned the standard calendar template that you just junked up. Instead, I recommend you make a copy of Project's standard calendar template and name it after the project you're currently working in or working on. Like the one we're working on is the software training manual. Then make all the changes that apply to that new calendar that you just created and assign to your project. The cool thing about that is that now you have two future templates to work with. You have your standard calendar template, which again we don't want to touch, we want to leave alone, and then your newly created software training manual template as we're discussing here. So if your next project, say we'll call it Project 2, closely resembles the working hours and the block times or the exception days of your new calendar, the software training manual calendar, then all you have to do is make a copy of that software training manual calendar and name it Project 2. And then you only have to make a few updates, if any, on that copied calendar. So in other words, you can make copies of copies of copies of any calendar that closely resemble or matches the project you want to work on. And again, by all means, leave the standard calendar template alone. Always make copies. Always make copies of the standard calendar or make copies of other calendars that you created in the past if it closely resembles and you have to make little changes of that new calendar that you're going to copy that template to. Now there's one place we can go to create our new calendar, based upon the standard calendar template that Project has assigned to us already. Then assign that calendar to our project instead and make any custom changes to that new calendar, including setting the working times, exception days, and so on. In other words, this can all be found under the Tools menu. Click on Tools, go down and click on Change Working Time. First of all, up at the top you can see the standard project calendar template. When you click on the drop-down arrow, you have two additional templates. First of all, let's look at the standard. When you select it, you can look down here in the working time view in the calendar, where any day that you have selected that's in white, over in the legend it says it's a working day. For the working hours, come over here and it says 8 to noon with an hour lunch and then from 1 to 5, Monday through Friday. So if I select a Sunday, you can see in the legend it's non-working time and I don't have any times displayed here because we're not supposed to work that day. Now we'll go ahead and change that to night shift and then be sure to select a working day here, and you can see the hours, and then of course we've got the 24 hours, which is non-stop. The plant or factory is always going, even though you won't have people working there, of course, 24/7. You may have 8-hour shifts coming and going. So let's go back to our standard project calendar because we want to create a copy of it and give it a new name. So it's selected here. Come over here and click on the Create New Calendar button. By default, it gives us a generic name. Now, like I said, we can create a calendar, one for each project, or if you absolutely know for certain that your company will never change its working time or hours or vacation, then you can go ahead and create one calendar and name it after your company and assign that to all your projects, because you're not changing for the client, they're going to change for you. But if you're going to be changing for the client, then again I recommend that you create a new calendar, one new calendar, based upon the name of each project. But to keep it simple, I'll just say that our company is stringent. These are our working hours or working times. So I'm going to call it the new base calendar for Dreamforce here for our company. Now I can make a copy of the standard calendar, or click on the drop down arrow, make a copy of the two other templates, or once I save this, it'll actually be listed down below here as well. So for example, when I click OK, there's the Dreamforce calendar. Now because I created it, it hasn't been assigned to the project yet as the default base calendar. I have to go into another window to do that. Right here we're just creating it and or making changes to the working times, which we'll cover later on. Once I create this calendar, you can click on the drop down arrow. Now I have 4 calendars. And when I click Create New, I have 4 calendars here. So again, like I said, that once you create this calendar and you're saying, well, Dreamforce already marked it up with all these different time changes, different working hours and so forth. If it closely resembles another project you're going to be working on, then make a copy of that one and make changes to that one, or little change, or hopefully little to no change at all if it's really that close. Otherwise, go back to your standard, start all over again, and create a new copy of the standard calendar which has nothing in it but, you know, the default working times of 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. I'm going to click Cancel. And in the next training video, with our Dreamforce calendar selected, I'm going to show you how to make exception days. These are exception days where we can actually customize a day and say we're not working that day, it's an exception for a holiday or vacation. Now that we know how to create our own calendar, as we learned in the previous training video, here I want to show you how to customize that calendar by adding an exception day or days. An exception day is a time you want to block out for events like holidays and vacation during a typical work week. In other words, days off. Think of it this way. You've got your typical work week Monday through Friday. Let's say you want to take August the 21st off. In other words, you want to make that an exception to your typical Monday through Friday work week. So to add exception days to your calendar here, you can do it one of 2 ways. The first way, I'm going to come down here on the Exceptions tab, click in the name field, and type in the name of your vacation or holiday. Mine's Labor Day. Hit the Tab key. Now, whatever you have selected up above in the calendar is going to be listed down below as the start and finish date for your vacation or holiday. Go ahead and click in the Start field and click on the drop-down arrow. Now, my project is going to start and end in 2008. So I can either scroll all the way back to 2008 or just click in here and then actually just type in the date. It'll be September 1st, so 9/1/08, and then hit Enter. Now I also need to change the finish date because otherwise I'm going to have Labor Day lasting all the way through close to the end of 2009. So click in here and again 9/1/08, hit Enter, and it looks good. Not only down here but also up in the calendar. Now the reason why it's in red is because you have it selected. It's a contrasting color. If you click off of it and don't select it, it gives us the original color, which is blue here, showing that that's our exception day. Let's do a few more. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down the calendar, and the second way to set your exception days is to go to the day that you want off, or in this case Thanksgiving. I'm going to click and drag the 27th through the 28th, and then come down here in the second row and type in Thanksgiving, and then hit Enter. The moment I hit Enter again, anytime I have the days selected up above, it'll automatically dump them down below, so I don't have to go in and type it or click on the arrow to set my dates, which makes it nice. Otherwise, if the calendar is like years away and you don't want to scroll, just go ahead and type them in. We'll do one more. Scroll down to December here. I'm going to have Christmas vacation, which will be clicking and dragging the 22nd through the 26th. Come down here, click in the cell, the third row, and then hit Enter, and we're done. Then click off in a blank area. You can see we've got that whole week as an exception, a week we won't be working. In the previous training video, we learned how to customize our calendar by adding days off, or what are referred to as exception days, like holidays and vacation. What if there's a day that you want the crew to start earlier than, let's say, the typical 8 to 5, or you want to give them a half a day off? For example, I've got my Christmas vacation here. Maybe I want everybody to come in from 8 to noon and then have the rest of the day off so they can start their weekend early and enjoy the rest of their Christmas break. So what I want to do is select the day that I want to change those hours by either, starting him earlier, or in this case, just having him come in from 8 to noon, and then come down here and click on the Work Weeks tab, and then down below the first one where it says Default, click in the blank row down below, and then type in the name of that day that you're changing. Well, this is going to be an early vacation that I want to name it, and then hit Enter. After I enter it, the only thing it's done is just says that this day here, when I click off in a blank area, is going to be set up for a non-default working day or working week, as you can see in the legend. It could be a week, or in this case a day. Nothing's changed, it's still 8 to 5. The only way to change that, besides having it display up here in the calendar as something different, as you can see when I click on the day, it still says 8 to 5. Come down here and select it, or again click on that day, and then over to the right click on the Details button. Now, as you recall, this falls on a Friday, so I'll come down here and select Friday, and then I want to be able to set the day to these specific working times. I'll select that option down below. It's 8 to noon. I could change that and say it's going to be 9 to 1, and then go from 2 to 6, but no, I want everybody to have an early Christmas vacation, so I'll select the header here, hit the delete key on the keyboard, click OK, and that's it. I'm done. How do I know it's been taken? Well, when you have the day selected as I do here, you can see that it's from 8 to noon. Excellent. So it looks good. And then click off on another date and it's your typical 8 to 5. So in summary, if you need to make any changes to a typical working day, instead of 8 to 5, come to your Work Weeks tab. Select that and then go ahead and click Details. Make sure you select the day that you want to change, and then by default it drops me down to the set day to the specific working times. Make your changes here. Click Cancel. You can even delete it and get rid of it. And then if you want to make, again, changes to the days that you have completely off or exception days, again, go to your Exceptions tab. And then when you're finished, just go ahead and click OK. And then again, if you need to make those changes, again, Tools to change working time. It's very important that you don't let the standard sit there, because if you come down here and start messing around, or you're panicking because, where's my exceptions, you don't have the right calendar selected. Click on the drop down arrow, go to Dreamforce, and it populates down below. Because the calendar you see up here is the one that we'll be displaying and working on down below. Now that I showed you how to create your own calendar and to be able to customize it with exception days or days off, days that you'll be on holiday or on vacation, and then we went over the work weeks, days that you're not going to be working the default hours of 8 to 5. Maybe you're working more hours, less hours. In other words, you change the default working time. Once you've customized your calendar for those two things, for the days off and the default working hours, then you want to be able to assign your calendar to the project. For example, let me click OK. To assign it, click on the project menu, go down and click on project information, and you'll see the default here is the standard template. We don't want that. Remember, we have days off and different working hours that we want to take into consideration, which is in our Dreamforce calendar. Go ahead and select it and click OK. For obvious reasons, if you don't change the calendar or set the right calendar to your project and click OK, you're going to be working off some other who knows what, different working times, which will screw up your stats, the project completion date, and everything else. It's a subtle change, but make sure that after you create and customize your calendar, you assign it to this project here and not leave it to the standard template. Your project is going to be typically made up of many tasks that need to be completed, obviously, in order to complete your project. There are 3 types of tasks. The first 2 tasks that we're going to cover in this training video are your summary task and your subtask. Your summary tasks are group headers or headings for your subtask. Your subtasks are very specific, detailed tasks. Let's take, for example, that you want your family to clean up your home. Now you could divide your home into summary tasks. For example, the kitchen, the living room, the basement. All of them on their own could be summary tasks. Let's take, for example, the summary task of cleaning the kitchen. In the summary task, you'll have specific tasks that will, when they're completed, be able to say that the kitchen is complete. For example, cleaning the fridge, washing the dishes, wiping down the drain boards. And then once you're done with that summary task, then you can move on to the next one, which is cleaning the living room. The subtask for that summary task could be vacuuming, dusting, and so on. Now let's get back to our project here, which is to publish a software training manual. The first thing I'm going to enter in are all my summary tasks. After I have those entered in, then when I brainstorm about each specific task, I'll go ahead and insert those underneath my summary task. So the first task, I'm going to come up here, click in the first cell in the first row and type in, and then hit enter. After I do that, it does a couple of things. First of all, it labels in the row header here that this is my first task, number 1. Over to the right we have the duration column, which says 1 day with a question mark, meaning I'll go ahead and keep it 1 day, but are you sure that you want it as 1 day to complete the task? Then we have our start and finish dates. Now remember, in the earlier training video we said our project is going to start on August 1st. Well, when you start a task, it assumes that you're going to start on the day that you said you want to start the project on. Now notice here, before we come over here into the Gantt chart, we've got a little divider line. You can click and drag that divider line over to the right to reveal more columns in your table here, or your entry table. The last column being the resource names. Now you can click and drag that and fit it right next to the resource names column, or better yet, if you want to get it right next to it, just hover over that divider bar, and when you're close enough to the next column, double click on it really fast and it'll snap right to it. So if I click and drag and get more than halfway in the predecessors here, and I double click really fast, it snaps right to the finished column. Now over in the Gantt chart, for that task that we have here, we have a little bar that's representative of that task. And how long is the bar? Well, it's 1 day. You can see up here in the timeline, it's just Friday. Now I'm going to come back in here and finish entering in all my summary tasks. Now you notice when I finish entering my task, my first task and my last task are obvious. We start the project or the manual, and then the manual is complete. In between, you can see I've got all these phases. That helps me to know that these are summary tasks. And then over here, everything begins on the same day. Again, project is a process. So right now, all we're concerned about is entering in our task. Well, I entered in the summary task. Let's say that I made a mistake in one of these entries and say it's not supposed to be the test phase summary, it's supposed to be the edit phase. Now there's a couple ways you can edit the task. One way is to click on the task to select it, then to click on it again until the cursor actually starts flashing within the cell. Now you can learn how to edit these cells by watching my Excel training videos. In any case, moving along, all I have to do is click and drag and select the text that I don't want, delete it, and then type in the new text and hit enter. Another way is to select the task again, come up here in the entry bar, select the text that you don't want, delete it, and type in the new text and hit enter. And then finally, you can actually double click on the task really fast and it brings up the detailed information for the task, the least of which is the name. Go ahead and select part of the name, type over it, and then hit enter, and it updates the task. Now, I've entered in all my phases here in my summary task. As I start brainstorming and realizing the specific tasks that need to be completed in each phase or each summary task, I can then go ahead and insert a new task below those phases or those summary tasks. For example, I've got a summary task I want to include below the research phase. All I have to do is select the task below and hit the insert key on the keyboard, and it'll push that task down and create a new task right below my research phase. Then I can go ahead and type in the new subtask, which is going to be Now notice, if the text goes beyond the width of the column, what you can do, and again we cover this in my Excel training videos, is come up here to the top and move your pointer in between the two column headers until it becomes arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then you can go ahead and click and drag to stretch the column out, or double click really fast and it'll do an auto fit or best fit. In other words, it will take the longest text within that column and fit the column to that text. Another way to do it, let me hit the undo arrow, is to double click really fast on the column header, and in the dialog box you have the best fit button. Go ahead and click on that and it does the same thing. Now let's say I have a few more subtasks that I want to include underneath the research phase, like below the interview subject matter experts. Like I said, all you have to do is select the task that you want to insert above and then hit the insert key on the keyboard, or select the task and right click on the row header here and go down and left click on new task, right click again and left click on new task. Now we have two new tasks above the outline phase here. Let me go ahead and type them in. Now let's see if this makes sense. I have my phases, which are defined by me as my summary task, and then below my summary task I have the subtask, which aren't defined by phases. So looking at the research phase, let's look at the subtask. Interviewing the subject matter experts, that's research. Examining the software is research, and then searching their corporate internal documentation is also research. Then when I hit the next phase, I know that that's not a subtask, that's the summary task, the beginning of a different group of subtasks. Now once you get your subtask in, let's say that search internal documentation should be the first subtask in the research phase. There's a couple ways you can move this around. You can either go ahead and click on the row header here, number 5, and then right click on it and go down to cut the task, and then go ahead and select the row header task that you want to insert or paste the task that you cut just above it, and then right click on it and then go down to paste, and it'll insert it right above it and push everything else down. Another way to do it is to, let's say for the examine software, go ahead and click on the row header number 5, and then as you hover over the row header 5, you'll see you got a 4-way arrow. Well, that 4-way arrow in Microsoft means that you can then click and move that, in this case, this task around. So if I click and I drag it up one, you see that fuzzy gray line? Wherever I let go of that fuzzy gray line is where my task is going to be dumped into, or between the search, internal documentation, and above the interview subject matter experts. Let go, and there it goes. So in summary, the only thing I want you to know here is how to add in your tasks and edit them if you make a mistake. Be sure to enter in your summary task, and then below your summary task, insert and create those subtasks or the specific detailed tasks that make up that, in this case, research phase. Once I've completed all 3 tasks, then you can say that your summary research is completed. In the previous training video, we learned how to add our task here, and we had 2 types of tasks. We had our summary and subtask. My summary task, as you recall, I gave it the suffix phase, so my research, outline, development, and so on. And then below my phases, we added the very detailed subtask. So when we complete a phase, that means we have to complete all the detailed subtasks below. If I've only completed 2 of the 3 in this case, then I still haven't completed my research. Now what I want to do here is show you how to add the project summary task, which you could say is a 3rd type of task, but really it's still the summary task. But in this case, it's a task name that's going to summarize the project's goal. Now I'm not going to come in here and insert the task and type in my project's goal. Instead, I'm going to check a little box, and automatically it's going to pull in my project summary task. Well, where does it pull from, and how does it know what my goal is? Well, if you recall in an earlier training video when we set up the properties for our file here, our Microsoft project, we came up here and clicked on the File menu and went down to Properties. On the Summary tab up in the title, that's what's going to be pulling as your project summary task. And then of course down here it's going to pull your comments as well, so keep that in mind. Once you set up your title here, go ahead and click OK. The next thing is to pull in the project summary task. You can do that by coming up, clicking on the Tools menu, going down to Options. On the View tab in the lower right corner, go ahead and check the box Show Project Summary Task. Click OK, and a couple of things have happened. The least of which is it pulled in the summary task here, and it gave it the task number of 0. Now that 0 means that it's not really a task, it's just a summary task, at least for the project as a whole. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, these other summary tasks here, why can't they be 0? We'll cover that in the outline training video. For right now, let's just focus on the project summary task. Now this summarizes the goal that our project is about, and up here in the entry bar, since I can't really see it, it's cut off here, it gives me the Spiffy Software Training Manual, and it's got .mpp. Now any changes you make here on the project summary task will update and reflect in the properties screen. So for example, if I click here and I hit the backspace key to get rid of the MPP extension and then hit enter, it should be updated now when I go File, down to Properties, and not display it in the title here on the Summary tab, which it doesn't, and so vice versa. If I go ahead and make changes here, it'll also update here. For example, in that indicator column here, the I is for indicator, when I hover over that little icon, it gives me the notes from the property view. Any comments? Now you can make the change here as well without going to the properties, just by simply double clicking on it really fast. Takes you to the Notes tab, and you can make your changes here. Click OK, and of course it will update the properties view as well. Now moving along, you'll notice that it's in bold, it's up at the top, it's our goal, it's the overall project goal, and in order to complete our goal we have to complete all these mini subtasks here, okay? Including summary tasks, which are the summary task of subtask. So when you look in the hierarchical structure, you've got your subtask to this summary task, but this summary task is to that summary task. So yes, you could have summary task within summary task. Well, let's keep it simple and stay focused on our project summary task, because again this is going to be a process, and we'll cover how to define your summary task here, the phases that I've marked as summary task in the outlining training video. But the point is clear that in order to complete our goal here, we have to complete everything below it. And you'll notice as far as the hierarchical structure goes, it indents it over just a bit. Duration is 1 day. That's a reflection, the project summary, of the duration of the entire project. Now it's not looking at it collectively, counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, all these days here. It just says, look, the first task starts on August the 1st, and also the next task. All the tasks start on August the 1st and all of them end on the same day. So it takes the earliest task, the start date, which is August the 1st, and then over here in the finish field, it'll take the task, the longest task, and say that that's the project summary finish date. And you'll see more of this in the next training video on setting up our durations, because not all of them are going to be one day. In fact, visually it looks better over here in the Gantt chart. In other words, up at the top you've got your project summary. It's got the first little starter marker here, and it'll always stay here on the start date. Now as these tasks expand and go out to 5 days, 6 weeks or so on, this end marker is going to stretch to capture that. So you can see as a summary as a whole that in order to complete the whole project, all these tasks below have to be completed, including the one that goes all the way out for 2 or 3 months. As we've already seen, when it comes to creating a new task, by default, Microsoft is going to give the task the duration of 1 day. Why the question mark? Well, it's an indicator to you to let you know that you didn't enter in the duration, but Microsoft did, so you're not confused. I mean, the moment you come in and you decide to change the day, it'll actually get rid of the question mark. Now keep in mind, you're going to be dealing with tasks that require maybe just minutes, hours, weeks, or months, not just days. And then also keep in mind that a day is considered 8 hours, a work week 40 hours, and a month 20 working days. So even if you have holidays, vacation, it'll keep pushing the month out until it actually hits the 20 days that you'll actually be working. Now when it comes to entering in your hours, minutes, days, or weeks, just go ahead and click in a cell next to a task that you want to change its duration. For your minutes, go ahead and type in any number and then the letter M after it and hit enter, and you can see it updates to 1 minute. And then you can look over in the Gantt chart and you can see you got a smaller bar there because it's not covering the day, it's just covering a minute. Now the difference between entering in minutes and months, with minutes it's the letter M, with months it's MO. So what's your MO? Go ahead and type in 2, MO, hit enter, and there's months. For hours, just type in the number and then the letter H. For weeks, type in the number and then the letter W, hit enter for your week. So let's get started and start entering in all our duration days for all our tasks here except the project summary task. And the reason why is because the project summary task will summarize all the tasks that need to be completed down below. For example, what's the longest task that needs to be completed in order for the project to be completed? Well, it's the examine software. It's going to take 1 week or 5 days. And that's what it's showing up above. It says 5 days it's going to take to complete the project because every other task starts on the first day and will be completed in 1 day, where this task right here is going to take an additional 4 days. And you can see up in the Gantt chart it's got its starter marker here for the project summary saying basically every task that you see lined up here starts on the same day, but there's only one task where the ending marker's at that ends on August the 7th, and you can see it right there, August the 7th. Speaking of which, when you look at these start and finish dates, I strongly recommend that you don't mess with them, leave them alone. When it comes to entering in your duration, do it in the duration field. I've had some issues when it comes to making changes to these, but if it works for you, go ahead and use them. Okay, let's start with our start manual here. Now, starting a manual doesn't take a day or 2 days or minutes unless you've got this big send-off party. I'm going to introduce you to what's called a milestone. By typing in the number 0 next to any task, turns it into a milestone, and you can see it representative over here in the Gantt chart by a black diamond and the date next to it. Milestones are like major points in your life, or in this case the project. A major point in the project is actually starting the project. By the same token, another major milestone or point in the project is completing it, so I can type in 0 for the manual complete. So now I have 2. Now you can have milestones throughout the project here. You can have them in between these tasks here, another black diamond, that when you hit that you can say, okay, here's a milestone, this is big, let's go ahead and celebrate, or let's get ready for the second phase. However you want them to mean something to you in the project as a major point to consider when you hit that milestone within your project. And the first one is when we start it. Next, let's go to the research phase. And I'm going to go ahead and type in the days here and examine the software, maybe 4 days, search the internet too, and so on. And if you notice real quick that when I type in the numbers, by default it puts in days. But because I made the change here to weeks, when I type in a number it's going to keep it as weeks. So if I don't want it as weeks, I need to come back in here and then type in for D as in days and hit enter, and there we go. And then I can go ahead and continue. Well, I'm done with that. Let me hit enter and go down to interview subject matter experts and do 2 days. 4 for the outline. Development phase could be 30 days to write the content. Editing 5 days, reviewing 4, printing maybe 2. and then I'm done. Now you may be asking me this question: how come we don't touch the project summary task, which keeps track of all the tasks down below, and yet we're actually setting up the summary task like the research phase, the outline phase, with their own days here? Well, think of it like this. Basically, I'm still in the brainstorming stage. Sure, I've got my summary task here and the 3 detailed tasks below it, but I haven't converted it and shown Microsoft that this is actually summary task, which I'll show you how to do it in our outline training video. For right now, I don't want to outline it just yet because I may have more subtasks for my research phase summary task. Even so, even if I go ahead and convert this and show Microsoft that this is a summary task, I can still make changes. So just know the flexibility of that. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and assign the numbers to my phases, and then when I do later on add additional subtasks, the moment that I convert this into a summary task where Microsoft recognizes it as such, it'll actually wipe out the numbers here and do what the project summary task is doing up above. In other words, it will wipe the number for the research phase and just keep track as a summary task for all the detail subtasks listed below. What's the longest task here? 4 days. So by default, when I do convert this, it'll say 4 days is the summary for all these 3 subtasks down below. So for right now, to keep it simple, I've added some of my summary task, a few detailed subtasks, and I'm typing in all the days, and then when I get a clearer vision or I get more feedback from other managers and resources, then I'll go ahead and update this, and then when I'm ready to go, I'll move on to the next step and go ahead and start creating outlines here. But for right now, to keep it simple, again, we've got the summary task. You know what it looks like. It keeps track of all the subtasks. Over in the Gantt chart, you can see that the summary task is also keeping track of the longest task. In fact, if you can scroll over quite a ways here, you can see there's the ending point. To complete the project, we got to complete this longest task here. Instead of scrolling back and forth, a shortcut to be able to view it in a condensed screen here is by crunching the timeline. To crunch the timeline so you're not viewing it every day here, just go ahead and right-click on the timeline and go to Zoom, or you can come up in the View menu and go down to Zoom and say that you want to see the entire project here and click OK, and it crunches the timeline so it's not every day of the week. Now you've got like skipping from Monday to Wednesday to Friday, so it can fit everything here so you can see how it's going to look overall. Then of course you can right-click here, go back to Zoom, and say you want to view it in 1 month, click OK and stretch it out a bit. Go ahead and play with it and find out which view works best for you. Now each task that we entered in here is going to require some sort of resource to complete the task. Resources, as I mentioned in my first training video, could include workers or work resources, materials, and costs. Well, I want to explain it to you a bit more in detail here. I'm going to open up my PowerPoint presentation. Not only do you have your typical 3 resources, which is your work, materials, and costs, but we have a 4th resource type, and that's budget. And I'm going to go in detail over each one of these here. First, let's talk about the work resources. There's 2 types of work resources. The most obvious one are the people that will be working on the task. That's your resource, your laborers, your writers, your editors. And then we have our equipment resources, something that we can use over and over again. Not only on a task or another task, but on a completely different project, like a forklift, maybe a paintbrush if we rinse it out, or a hammer. Now you could say that the hammer and the forklift could be a material resource, but material resources are basically consumable items. So the definition would be supplies or consumable items used to complete a task. So in other words, once we're done with the task, like writing our book, we will have used up quite a bit of paper. Also some ink, and well, if we were building a home, we'd use up this lumber here. So consumable items will be your material resources when it's used up when you finish completing a task. The 3rd type of resource are your cost resources. They're basically miscellaneous or indirect expenses that will vary from task to task and don't change by the amount of work performed. And they include airfare, lodging, meals, things that don't really have a direct impact. But you still want to keep track of the expenses because they're part of the project. And then finally we have what's called a budget resource. And basically it's the maximum amount of money set aside or budgeted for each resource type. So we've got a set budget for our work. We've got a set budget for the materials, a set budget for the costs. And like I said, those are the 4 types of resources. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and escape out of the PowerPoint presentation, go back to my project, and let's get out of this view to our resource sheet view where we can enter in all our resources. Now to change views, you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either come up here and click on the View menu and go down and change views by selecting another view. Right now you can see Gantt charts checked. If I go to resource sheet, it'll take me right there. Or you can come down here and click on the view bar, and it pops open the bar to the left hand side, which gives you all these different views that you can quickly click on just by moving your mouse over here. Not only that, but if you right click on the view bar, you can also choose from a list here. In other words, this view bar, let me click off in a blank area, has quite a few views, right? And you can scroll down a bit by clicking on the drop down arrow or up. But instead of moving your mouse down or up, I can just right click and not have to go too far to go to my resource sheet view. Also, I can uncheck the view bar and have it collapsed, or I can go ahead and right click on the view bar and say view the view bar, or not even open it up and just go right to my resource sheet. Now anytime you're in a new view, you want to ask yourself two questions, and I'm going to pound this home because I did cover it in a previous training video. But some of the confusion comes in is when you go to a new view, is what view am I in and what table am I in? Well, this is the resource sheet view, but I'm in the entry table. How do I know? Well, if I click on the view menu and I go down to table, it says entry, and you can see it's checked over here. Because I'm in the resource sheet view and it's checked, I could be in a different table within that view, which could be the cost view. So keep that in mind so you know where you're at all times, those two questions. What view am I in and what table am I in? And you can verify that again through the view menu. Now, I know there's a lot of columns here in the resource sheet. We're going to keep it really simple to introduce you to the resource sheet. We're going to enter in all the resources names like our editors, project managers, publishers, the materials like glossy paper. Then we'll enter in the type of resource, whether it's work, material, or cost. Remember, we have the three types of resources, and we'll talk about the additional fourth one, the budget resource, later. And then material labels, like if we have paper, we could give it a label as in reams of paper. And then finally, we'll cover the group here in this training video, which means, are the resources internal or are they coming externally? In other words, have we outsourced this to somebody else? Are we hiring on an editor or contracting somebody in to be our resource to help complete the task, which when finished will complete the project? So let's start with the first resource name. We'll type it in. We'll say it's writer 1. Now you can have, if you've got the person's name, you can say it's Bob, he's the writer, Susie, she's a writer. But to keep it simple, I'm just going to call them writer 1, 2, and 3. Then when I'm finished, I'll hit the Tab key. Now by default, Microsoft is going to fill in a lot of fields for us. One of the defaults is the type of resource it is, it's work. You can click on the drop down arrow and you have the two other different types. Now wait a minute, I thought Kurt said that there was 4 different types of resources. Well, we got our work, material, cost. What about budget? Budget isn't listed here. Basically for budget, you'll select cost and then you'll have to check a little box to define that the cost is going to be the cost for your budget or your budget cost. We'll cover that in just a minute here. So the writer is a work resource. It's not material. I'm not going to, use him up as a consumable item on a task. And then over here for the group, you can do whatever you want when it comes to group. I'm keeping it simple. This writer is employed by us, so I'm going to put him in the internal group and hit enter. And for right now, that's what we're going to focus on. In a later training video, I'll cover over the rest of the columns here, like the max units and the standard rate, cost used, and so on. So the next resource, I'm just going to go ahead and finish typing in quite a few here. Work, and it's internal. I'm just going to zip down here. That's fine. Now, as I said before, Microsoft Project has a bunch of cells. It looks just like an Excel spreadsheet. There's some features and things that when you do in Excel will also apply here in Project. For example, instead of coming in here and typing in internal for all these resources here, I can come up here and select the first one, and this is something you would learn in one of my Excel training videos, is using the autofill handle. When you hover over the lower right hand corner and your pointer turns into a black cross, you then can go ahead and click on that black cross and drag it down, and it will automatically fill in the same information that you clicked and dragged from into the cell sequentially as you drag down below. So there I don't have to type it in over and over again. Let me go ahead and now my travel expenses are going to be cost, because there's no real way to tie it to a task as you would like with work, a worker actually working on the task, or consumable material that I can actually say when the task is completed we used 50 sheets of paper. Now here's my glossy paper. That's going to be material that we can consume in a task or a couple of tasks. So I'll click on the drop down arrow and say material. Or you can type in the letter, the first letter, C for cost, and let me backspace M for material, then hit your tab key. Now the material label here, I'm going to have it as reams. So every time I assign glossy paper to a task, it's going to be in reams. 1 ream, 2 reams, how many sheets of paper in a ream? Like 500? In any case, that's what it means to me here. And you'll see later on how that's going to apply when we start assigning our resources to our task. Now every ream of paper that we use is going to be some sort of cost attached to it. So later on, when we start assigning our resources like our glossy paper to a task, we can assign 1, 2, 3, or 4 reams. And each ream, maybe it'll be $2 or $3 a ream. In any case, we'll finish this up. Now next, remember our fourth resource type? It's not listed here, which is work, material, and cost, but budget. So for example, I've got a budget for all my cost resources. I have a budget for all my work resources. So all these workers here, let's say the total budget for them is $5,000. To enter my budget or the limit for my different types of resources here, my work, cost, material, I'm going to come down here and type it like so. You don't have to type it this way. You can type it any way you want or spell it out, whatever makes sense to you, that this is going to be your budget resource for your costs or miscellaneous. And this is going to be tied to our costs, okay? Now I'm not done yet. Let me finish typing in the rest of my budgets for labor, which will be work. That works out good. And then my budget for my material resource. And I'll click on the drop down arrow and say your material. Okay, so right now, Project does not see the difference between my budgets and my other resources here. To make that difference, to make that change, I have to come up here and let's start with our first our budget miscellaneous or budget for our cost resources. Just double click on it really fast to bring up the dialog box here. And up here on the General tab, there's a little teeny tiny box over here that when you check it, it'll change this resource from a standard resource that Project thinks is just another cost resource into an actual budget that later on I'll show you where you can go ahead and type in the money. And for this resource, it's going to be the total amount of money that you can spend or that you're allowed to spend on all the other cost resources. Go ahead and click OK. And of course we'll need to convert these to the budget resources by double clicking on it. General tab, checking the budget box here, clicking OK. And of course our materials, checking the budget box and clicking OK. So now Project sees these resources up here that I have selected as typical resources that I can assign to the project for work, cost, and materials. Just by simply typing in the budget label down here doesn't make it a budget resource until I actually double click and again check that budget box. So I have a budget for my cost now, my work, and my materials. And like I said, later on we're going to go ahead and assign the actual cost. Like a writer, we may charge $50 an hour, so I'll go ahead and put it over in the standard rate per hour. And also our editor, and then we'll have a set budget that we'll enter in for the cost, work, and materials. As you recall in the previous training video, we came here to our resource sheet view in order to learn how to enter in our resources. How do I know what view I'm in? Well, you can come over here and look on the view bar. It says right here, resource sheet. What I want to do now is I want to get back to the Gantt chart view because I want to cover outlining our task. Now to get back there, I can do it one of a few ways as we covered in another training video. You can either come up here and click on the view menu and go down to Gantt chart, or come over here and right click on the collapse view bar and go to Gantt chart. Or expand the view bar by checking it and then come up here and click on Gantt chart. And then to have more view over here, you can right click and uncheck the view bar to collapse it. The first thing you'll probably notice is that I've added more tasks to my project. And as a quick review, I've got my summary task and my subtask. I've identified or marked my summary task by adding the word phase to them. So there's my research phase. Holding down the control key, I can go ahead and select the rest of my summary tasks here. And as you recall, a summary task requires many subtasks in order to complete it. So you could say for the research part of my project, I specifically need to complete these 3 subtasks. And then for the outline, phase, those 3, development, and so on. Now the whole point of this training video is to get Project to recognize which ones are your summary tasks, because there's a great benefit if it does. And it's really simple to do. All you have to do is, well, let me click off in a blank area, is to go ahead and select your subtask. So for my research phase, I'm just going to click and drag and select the 3 subtasks there. come up here on the formatting toolbar and click on the indent button. Of course, you've got your shortcut there, Alt Shift and the right arrow, and click on it once and a couple of things happen. First of all, notice that the summary task is in bold, just like our project summary task up above. Also, it sets up the hierarchy of it because the subtasks have been indented. Also, you notice over in the Gantt chart, you got the project summary bar, and then you have the task summary bar. They both have starting points. They mark the earliest task, and in this case for the research phase, one of these tasks, but the earliest is that they all start at the same time, so the earliest is going to be August 1st, and then it takes the task furthest out. The tasks furthest out, coincidentally, are both these tasks. They both are 5 days. And it summarizes how long it'll take to complete all 3 tasks, or subtasks, and it'll take 5 days. Now, it's not doing it vertically and saying 5 plus 5 plus 2, well that's 12. It's actually doing it right now horizontally. Now, I know your tasks are not all going to start at the same time, and we'll cover this in a later training video on creating links or linking up our task and creating relationships. In other words, when this task completes, 5 days, then start the next one. So that's an additional 5 days, you've got 10. And then when that one completes, do the next one, so you're 2 days further out. So when all is said and done, you've got a total of 5 days, then start the next one 5 days, then start the next one 2 days, and you got 12 days. It'll summarize that and give you 12 days. You should also know that it also summarizes the cost. Later on, when we apply cost to each one of our tasks, we can go to a view that will show the total cost for the research phase. And of course, because we have a project summary task here, we can get the total cost for the project as well. But let's go ahead and stay focused. All we want to do here is to get project to see what the summary tasks are and the subtasks. So I'm going to go ahead and select all my subtasks by holding down the control key to make it easier and go faster. And then after I select them all, I can either click on the indent button or I can use the shortcut Alt, Shift, and right arrow, and there we go, we're done. And you'll notice that any changes that are made, that they shaded in the table, the cells here. And when I come up here and click Save, they disappear. Also your undo button, so make sure that before you save it, you like what you see. Or you go ahead and if you're not sure, go ahead and make a copy, do a file to save as, and save a copy. Now you might be asking yourself, well, surely if I can indent one of these and make it a subtask to the summary task, then I can go ahead and come up here and do an outdent. Well, just be careful what you select and what you're getting into. For example, if I go ahead and say, look, I don't want this to be a subtask, when I select it and I click on the opposite arrow here, or the outdent, it actually turns it into a summary task and takes the outline phase and just keeps it as a regular task. So now, what used to be a subtask here is now a summary task for these 2 subtasks here. So just be careful what you're selecting and outdenting so you know what you're doing. And if you want that to be your summary task, great. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and hit undo and get back to normal. Now once you're able to get project to identify what your summary and subtasks are, we can then move ahead and apply the outline number format, or what's also referred to as the WBS, or work breakdown structure. Now you could say, well, why do I need another number format? I already have the numbers over here. Well, this doesn't really break your task down, in that when you go from task 2 to task 3, what does it tell you over here, the hierarchy of these tasks? It doesn't. I'd have to actually look over here to say, oh, that's right, this is bold, this is a summary task, and these are indented, so they're the subtask. But if I apply the WBS, which will be great in reports, what that will do is it'll take a number, like it'll assign this the summary task, let's say the number 2, and then its subtask, instead of going sequentially 3, 4, 5, 6, it'll go 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and so on. In fact, to turn this on, just come up here, click on the Tools menu, go down to Options. It's on the View tab. Come down at the bottom and check the box Show Outline Number and click OK, and there you go. We have our 2, and then we have our 2's, and then we have our 3, and then our 3's, 3.1, 3.2. So like I said, later on in reports, I'm able to break this down and go, that's right. I may not have the indents in my reports here to let me know that this is the summary task, but I know that when it's a 2.1, 2.2, that those are subtasks to the summary task, which is just plain old 2. And that would be your work breakdown structure or your outline number format. Now, as a little side note here, you notice that they have these little minus signs. Well, if you don't want to focus on certain parts of your project, or you want to be able to see parts of it without seeing others, just go ahead and click on that minus sign and it'll collapse all the subtasks underneath that summary task. So there's a couple of minus signs. You can even collapse the whole project there and expand it. Also, you can come up here and click on the Show drop-down arrow and say All Subtasks, so it pops everything open that was collapsed. Or click on the drop-down arrow and just say, I just want to see the first outline. In which case, it'll just show our milestones and all our summary tasks, not the subtasks. So let's go back to All.